we're going to discuss all of that. The streaming's just about to start going. So I think we've started. So hey there, everybody. Welcome. We've got a special guest all the way from Dublin, Ireland, residing in Perth, is Brendan. Hey, Brendan, how you going?
Hi, Paul. Thanks for bringing me along. Hi, everybody.
And just to give you a little bit of who Brendan is, Brendan's created, well, why don't you tell us your will product that you've created?
Okay, look, I'll keep this short. So myself and my co-founder, Vern, have created a digital will-making platform called duckrow.io. And it's basically aimed at the fact that way over half of Australians do not have wills. Wills have always been expensive and the last thought on people's minds, if you'll pardon that slight pun. But the reality is a will should be something simple, cheap, easy to manage. And we've put the technology in place with Duckrow, and it's duckrow.io, to actually enable people to make wills and to keep them up to date. Very simply. So, originally I'm a chartered accountant, not what I've done for a long time, been in Australia a dozen years, know Paul through networking and his business, know Adrian through what he does, and know Sally as well. So good to be here. Thanks, Paul.
Look, it's good to have you here. And, the thing about having a will is you never know when your time is up. And it can happen all of a sudden. So it's very important to go and get your will. So anybody that's interested, make sure that they connect with Brendan. It's online, it's digital, it's easy. The witnesses are all online. Best will in Australia. So what I thought we'd talk today about is inflation. And so now, I'll just give you a definition of inflation since Sally was quickly looking it up. Inflation refers to the sustained increase in the general price level of goods and services in an economy over a period of time. This means that, on average, prices are rising and the purchasing power of money is decreasing. So I think what we've all experienced over the last 12 months or so is perhaps, in my lifetime, one of the worst inflationary periods where goods and services have skyrocketed through the roof. I think I've mentioned that my mortgage has gone up 25% alone. Now my phone bill has gone from $25 to $34 as a percentage. It's gone up substantially as well. I remember during the COVID times where a lettuce cost $10. So inflation is an interesting topic to talk about. So I think I'll start opening by just getting everybody's general views on inflation. And I'll start with Sally. Sally, what's your general view of inflation? Ladies first. Now you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I said I'm going to listen in and learn a lot from today. But, inflation is just how it hits my back pocket, right? It's just the living expenses for me. And I just feel that there's a lot of manipulation behind a lot of this too, but that's just a whole other topic around it. But I wouldn't mind if I thought it was all fair and equal, and I just don't feel it is. That's my insight around what's going on with inflation these days. I think it's manipulating us.
I tend to agree with you. I do think that inflation is manipulated, and the questions are why do we have to have inflation? Why can't we have deflation? We might get onto that topic later on. If you're a conspirator's theory, if you like your conspiracy theories, well, Sally's going to fill us in on that side of the thing.
It's just a vibe. I can feel it. If it looks like shit, smells like shit, well, it is shit. So that's my take on it all. So, yeah.
Right. Adrian's frozen. Oh, no, he's just looking up thinking. What's your view on inflation, Adrian?
in July, Paul Cummins and I went to the Filipino Expo down at Olympic Park in one of the buildings there, and they had this fantastic speaker. He's a stockbroker and works for a stockbroking firm, and he said what he said was, during COVID, a lot of the prices were pushed up because of genuine scarcity of the goods. What he said, and this is why people are boycotting Coles and Woolworths, is that many of the places that increased their prices during COVID because of the genuine scarcity did not reduce the prices after COVID because they realized everyone was used to it. Now, what's happened and why it's hurting people's back pockets is because those prices have stayed the same. People's mortgages have gone up, petrol's gone up, and wages have relatively stayed the same because people have not been changing jobs, and they're not necessarily in jobs where they have a yearly salary review or a 6-monthly review. I don't even know if a 6-monthly salary review would be possible in Australia, but certainly not an annual review for their salary. Now, there is some silver lining I've just been thinking while listening to you speak. That applies to goods. But for internet savvy people like us, wouldn't it be fair to say that we've experienced deflation in a lot of services, particularly in things like business services? So take lawyers, take wills, for example, that reduce the cost of that overall into a package that can be annualized, and once you get past the 5-year mark, it's cost you nothing. But law firms, accounting, everything has been digitized and gone online. So if you go online, you'll find most of the things are cheap. And testament to that is last month was my son's birthday, and I did not even need to think of a present. I saw an ad on Temu for a lightsaber.
I think Adrian's just zoned out and is thinking about the lightsaber too much. But Brendan, you're the wills guy and you're the chartered accountant or ex-chartered accountant. What's your take on inflation?
The quick answer is. Sorry, Adrian, go ahead. You were in the middle of a thought there. Yeah.
$3.69. Now that's deflation. That means there are goods and services out there, but you probably have to go online. I haven't done the comparison of shopping with the supermarkets online since COVID to see if you do it now, if the prices are cheaper than in store. Probably marginally not even close to being worth it when you consider the price of petrol, even and delivery. But certainly for other things like any of the people you can get on Fiverr or Upwork, or if you're buying something internationally. Like I've bought a couple of presents in the last 2 weeks as well. Both of them came from America and was cheaper in the end than me going and shopping for them in time spent in shops and driving to those shops, and it was delivered on time. So there will be some things that are cheaper, but I think the main argument everybody has in complaint is for essentials like fruit and vegetables, and essentials like toiletries and carbohydrates.
Yeah, look, you're right. I think, but when you're talking about those things that have gotten cheaper, that's just the advancements of technology. I think that would have happened regardless of whether we had COVID or not. I know I bought this watch. I know it looks like a toy watch. It got delivered in 2 days, right? And it was dirt cheap, and let's see if this watch lasts. but we'll see. So, Brendan, what's your take on inflation?
The only kind of definitive thing that I believe I can say is that it's complicated for a start, but then there are all of the angles in it. I 100% agree that the Coles and the Woolworths and the other similar type operations are gouging the public. So we've been talking about inflation in a general sense of maybe between 5 and 10% over the last few years. But I know I went into Coles a few years ago, and Woolworths, they're the same, to buy a packet of biscuits for about $3. And I remember it went to over $4. Now, that's not a 5% or a 10% increase. That's a 30 to 40% increase. And because our whole system doesn't teach people about simple numbers, you think, oh, it's $1, doesn't matter. It's 30% and it eats directly into your after-tax income. It's horrendous. Now, let me say a couple of other things, because I kind of could go on about this. This really makes me angry. There was no considered effort to address inflation during or just after COVID. And there are certain ways that that could have been done in terms of the corporate tax system, because it was those corporates that pushed up prices. And then, as Sally said correctly, people got used to them. So if something goes from $3 to $4, that's a 33% increase in inflation. But if it stays at $4 for a year, the rate of inflation goes back to zero, but it's still bloody well up there and you're still being gouged. So there is that kind of hidden effect about the whole thing. And it means that the profit on that single packet of biscuits has gone up and has stayed up. And that can only be addressed by the tax system. Now, I'm no raving kind of anti-capitalist, leftist, tax them until they bleed type person. But I do believe that the corporates need to actually have a social responsibility. And that was not addressed. Now, let me quickly try and jump to the other side. Inflation can be very good. If anybody can remember, and my parents did this, my parents bought a house when I was a young kid during the 70s in Ireland, and it was for less than $10,000. 30 years later, when they passed on and the house was sold, it actually was for a few $100,000. So if you are sitting on an asset like that over a long period of time, you gain. But probably the equivalent that now we're not used to is the value of the mortgage that they took out in the early 70s plummeted. Now, that's not a short-term thing. And what's more, you can't actually anticipate it until it happens. But debt goes down when inflation is in place for a long time in relative terms. If I take a mortgage for $10,000 and my asset goes up to $100,000, hey, I'm not really worried about that mortgage anymore. If, on the other hand, the asset goes down and the debt goes up, where you've got deflation, you've got the opposite problem. So it really, truly is complicated. But in the short term, my view is that there should be massive pressure on the corporates who have taken advantage of the system to actually bring down prices. And I've seen absolutely no commentary by anybody to push Coles and Woolworths and everybody else who's done it to do this. So I think you're muted, Paul.
Yeah, so that begs the question. We've got Coles and Woolworths, and having a monopoly is illegal. But we really only have Coles and Woolworths. We've got Aldi, but that's a small player, really, compared to Coles and Woolworths. So we've got duopoly, right, with the two of them. Do you think that we probably should perhaps break up a duopoly and make sure that there's 5 or 6 different players in the market? Or do you think that just Coles and Woolworths, who probably collude with each other to bring up the prices, right? I got a few nods, so it sounds like people are nodding that they're colluding. So what do you think about that, Adrian?
I think you have to be careful, because the inflation, it would be to some extent the price of salaries, getting people to work. I know with a lot of not small, but medium-sized businesses, they're having trouble keeping staff. And, it was you who said it, Paul, that it's, minimum is $60,000 to get someone to come for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Just to show up doesn't mean they're going to do anything amazing or useful. That's just to get them in the seat in your office. That's the minimum requirement. So if you go above that, you're expecting from somebody. That means salaries pretty much going up $20,000 to $30,000 a year for people who need people and cannot work without them. Now, if you broke up the duopolies, I'm not trying to be a devil's advocate or anything, but if you broke up those parties, what would that do to the salaries of those workers, and also attracting people to the alternative? I can see a huge movement at the moment where people's distrust in the government and the old ways and the food pyramid, they've distrust of everything that we've held dear as a rock to get us through growing up. And I see a huge movement of people just going natural and looking for a local community garden or someone who grows their own food, and say, okay, they don't have everything that Coles has or Aldi has, but they have what I need, and what I need is fresh fruit and vegetables. I can see, I've been saying this since 2019. When the shit hits the fan, you will see a re-emergence of cottage industry. And cottage industry is how most countries go from agriculture into industrial. They have, women who are all sewing at home, doing piecework at home on their sewing machines, and someone who comes around on a motorbike and collects the finished pieces and takes them to the packing shed where they get wrapped and folded and everything like that. I can see that happening en masse when it push comes to shove and people are not getting the money from their salaries. You will see people mowing lawns for people and they don't belong to Jim's Mowing. You will see people doing accounting for cheese. So, people making cakes for people. You will see a lot more because people will have to come together. We, they don't trust councils, they don't trust state government, they don't trust national level. You don't even trust our compatriots. If you look at the last referendum, no one can trust anybody now, right? Because everyone's let everyone down. So what will they do? We've got trouble overseas. No one's going to go overseas in a hurry because there's trouble everywhere. They're going to stay here. So people are going to look, where does charity start? It starts at home. They're going to start growing their own food. They're going to realize what every farmer realizes: very easy to end up with a surplus. What do you do with it? Give it away or sell it. What we see online will be people, you'll be able, okay, this may sound a bit, I don't want to ruin your podcast, Paul, but I can see people going on to Craigslist, Gumtree, eBay to buy a head of broccoli that's in their local area. Not because it's cheaper, because it's organic and it's cheaper and it's local. And that's where they're going to get their vitamins. People who are buying shares in mineral and supplement companies, that's going to dive. There are people watching so much on TikTok now about how to get those supplements naturally through unmanufactured food.
Could I pick up? Do you mind if I
Sure.
pick up on one point you've made there, Adrian? And I think it's actually very relevant. You commented
do so.
that
Do so.
that
That's why I brought you here, Brendan. We have a saying
You-
in China, real gold is not afraid of heat.
you guys know me very well. I tend to have an opinion of on everything, even when it's not always correct. But you said something that I think is hugely relevant to the general place that we are in the world and in relation to inflation. You said that people will or may stop going overseas. I think that's a very valid comment because, because. But when times are tough, and you really have to go back through history, not modern history, the whole history of humanity, when times are tough, people bunker down, they stop spending, they save, they put money in the bank, they make sure that they have access to their water, to their shelter, to their family, to their food, to their local community. From the monetary side of things, if people start saving more, that has an immediate direct impact on inflation. The money goes into the bank, they stop spending, so there's less push. So that stops prices going up a little bit. And in fact, it may cause them to come down. It also means that interest rates begin to come down if people are putting lots of money into the bank as opposed to heading down and paying. And this is one of my pet hates, paying $6 or $7 for a cup of coffee when they can actually make it for 20 or 30 cents at home. That begins to change people's mindsets. And if you look at, through my lifetime, from being a kid when inflation was an embedded phenomenon throughout the 70s and the 80s. So I grew up thinking, and I won't date myself exactly, but my first annual salary was so laughable that you would fall off the chair if I told you what it was. But my second year's salary was over twice the first year's salary. It more than doubled. Now, you can't imagine that, but it was exactly what was normal at the time. So we forget what we've forgotten, but we relearn it and we begin to save more. We begin to actually think, okay, inflation is a phenomenon that we get used to. What we've got used to over 20 years, and especially since the GFC, is that interest rates should be below 3%. That's ridiculous. In the history of the world, they've never stayed below 3%. And you can say that technology and the other factors mean that interest rates stay low. No, it doesn't. It's actually the supply and demand for money that drives interest rates across the economy and the world. And if people start saving, that changes the equation hugely.
It's interesting you're talking about interest rates and below 3% and things like that, because in some Arab countries, it's actually, you're not allowed to charge interest rates. And if you have a look at the Arab countries, they've got a lot of money.
But in fairness, most of that money is coming from natural resources, and
I
they do
know.
have ways around the usury rules. So, the Arabs kind of effectively invented our modern numeric system. They're pretty damn sophisticated when it comes to commerce, and they've been at it a lot longer than Europeans in many ways. But in the West, the wider West, from Japan through Australia, New Zealand, Europe, North America, etc., we have become so sophisticated now we're dependent on technology and services. In the Arab world, which to a large extent is still classed as developing, in most of it, they're still trading on natural resources and primary products and trade, as opposed to the services that we're focused on. So I partially agree with you, Adrian, about the change in how people look at things. But if you're living bang in the center of Sydney or Melbourne or any large city, it's going to be a little bit harder to access those little cottage industries than if you're in, a country town where that has never gone away completely.
I disagree. I think what is happening now, people are really looking after their health like never before. And they're not just looking at their physical health, they're looking at their mental health. And what you will see is those delivery guys for Deliveroo are going to be doing it for organic farms and cottage industry manufacturers of pies, bread, whatever they're making with the stuff, whether it's smoothies or whatever, because we have learnt during COVID how to behave as a society with a common cause. And that common cause was to not infect each other, which is the same as not going and hitting somebody. So not passing on something bad to somebody. And what came out of COVID was a whole lot of new businesses. And for people, sure, there are people that won't be able to do internet business, but they'll be able to support those internet businesses. And the way also people are thinking that they don't need to be a millionaire to be happy with their family. And you know, we also have a huge aging population that are stuck in the old ways that are not applicable to what I consider the four of us here are all the younger generation. We are not baby boomers.
I plead not part of that anymore.
You know, so people talk about the new wave and stuff. It's not that. It's people are seeing their body change with age, and they're realizing there are natural remedies for this. And the most natural remedy is unadulterated food, plants and vegetables. And there's going to be a demand for that. No one's going to go and pay $30 to Woolworths when you've got a bunch of hippies on the same block as your house who are growing it in their backyard and will give you a mixed box for $30.
Well, Adrian, Sally and I have a friend that started her own community garden, Claire.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And you're in the same suburb as Claire? You see Claire all the time?
No, she's in a different suburb, but I have the same sort of thing. So, you know, Paul, Claire, and myself are in an energy group, and what Adrian has been talking about is very much the shift towards the 5D, if you want to call it that, from where we are. We're sort of transitioning through, and it's all about community, it's all about collaboration, and it's all about coming together as connections. So working in local communities, building, you know, veggie patches together and sharing. Where I live here, we have a Facebook page called, I think it's Summers Pay It Forward. And so anybody who's got excess from their gardens, like around the corner's got lemons, someone else has herbs, and it's sharing. And it's not just the food, it's anything that people are getting rid of. It goes out on the nature strip and it's put on the Facebook page. So it's sharing. So reducing the waste and sharing what we've got, but particularly they do the herbs, the veggies, whatever. We've got a heap of asparagus, and, you know, come and get it. It's this whole thing, this shift is towards this community and locally based, and it's back to basics, which came out of what's that, shaking your head, Adrian? It came out of
I'm sorry, I'm being Indian.
So,
I'm agreeing with you.
The inflation that we've got is it's all about the utilities. So it's the stuff that we need, right? So it's the gas, electricity, it's the phones, it's the postage, you know, and the interest rate. So that's very, if you want to call it 3D, but it's that heavy, dark energy stuff. Whereas where we're shifting towards is bringing it back to basics and bringing it back to, like Brendan was saying, the beginning of humanity, and it's like the barter system. So, you know, cutting wood for someone and getting in exchange for some eggs, you know, and we really are going backwards to basics.
Yeah. Well, I don't call it backwards, because even if we all moved to Mars tomorrow, we would be doing the same thing. We wouldn't be growing food on Mars to make shitty New York street hot dogs. We'd be growing vegetables and fruit to sustain us and longevity of the astronauts living there. It would be growing good stuff. Now, what's the difference between doing that on Earth and Mars?
Gravity.
So
you can do it on Earth, you can't do it on Mars.
Right.
You can do it on Mars if you have built a building on Mars and you have a you know, a microclimate, what do they call it, microclimate or whatever within the building, to do that, like a greenhouse, and they import everything. But they're not going to be doing it all for bad stuff up there necessarily. They're going to be doing what's good for a human body in an altered state. So you have low oxygen and whatever. That's too complicated. The point is, it's going to be a little farm. It's not going to be an industrial farm. And we're not going to have industrial sized farms taking over our suburbs. We're going to have community farms taking it over in terms of people using their backyards for that purpose, because they can't make an income any other way than mobilizing what they have within their house and home resources, whether it's a sewing machine, a car, a backyard, or a skill.
Well, Adrian, I thank you for your input. It's come to the end of time. We probably
Do you
could
think
keep talking about
have
this
we
much
broken the
longer.
internet now? Do you think there's heaps of people watching and we've broken the internet?
I love the fact that you and Brendan come on, and I love Brendan. He doesn't take much bullshit, do you, Brendan? You're a straight shooter, aren't you?
My
Um,
wife
The-
loves
the-
listening
the
to
world
Sally.
is-
She says she's just
yeah.
got so much energy.
Oh, Sally's amazing.
Over to you, Brendan. Sorry, what was?
No. The world is just, there's 8 billion of us. It's hard to actually try and figure it out for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. With that, I will say thank you guys for participating, and we'll be back next week, same time. And
My pleasure.
Come back and play, Brendan. We love